have it. Elliott, welcome to the show.
Hi, Jonathan. Pleasure. Thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, thank
All
you.
the way across the pond.
That's right. You're going to be either my second or third guest from across the pond. I've had Chris Marr, who I've introduced you to, and a guy named Thor Holt, who you probably need to meet as well, because Thor actually teaches how to pitch investors. So I need to make that introduction for you. There's my first takeaway from my meeting. I'm
Wow,
so
we're 10 seconds in.
we're
Thank you.
we're 10 seconds in and it's already happening. That's as you keep saying in your emails to people, the power of networking, right? So I think that's just a great comment. I'm so happy to have you on here because we literally just met last week, just randomly connected, and I
Yep.
feel the same as you did. It seems like we hit it off pretty quickly, even though we are across the pond from each other, and we shared some information. So I'm excited to have you on the show. Before, I want to talk about some of the things you and I discussed, which is that startup lifestyle and designing your life, and talk about the company you're with,
Mhm.
Growth Enabler. But before we get to that, maybe you could give the audience some context, a little bit about your background and where you came from.
Yeah, sure. So, firstly, I suppose touching upon the power of networking, it's worth laying some context as to how this came about
Sure.
for the listeners. Essentially, I'm working with a company called Growth Enabler, and I'm doing a project and some research into the VC market, which I'm sure we'll chat about in a second, Jonathan. But in essence, I kind of had the guts to creatively catch the attention of Jonathan. I saw some of his posts on Quora, and I sent him a 300 character message on LinkedIn. Not expecting much, to be quite honest. It's a numbers game
It's
at
a
the
usual
time.
response for people that interact with me. They're not expecting much.
That's an interesting one. I think such is not the case after
Oh,
our conversation, for sure.
sure.
And reach out to you. An, an opportunity to engage. You found what I said of some value, which is relieving. Shows that I influence you somehow. And ultimately, we had a great conversation. But the point was, I was doing some thinking, prior to the show, Jonathan, about how has this worked? How has this happened? How have we
Mm,
got to here? And
mm,
it for me, it came down to kind of four things, which whether it was my initial cold message to you or otherwise, and whether it's a referral. And those four things are trust, honesty, integrity, and alignment of expectations.
so
And
good.
I'll just repeat them: trust, honesty, integrity, and alignment of expectations. And I think, I've thought about that with regards to how our paths have crossed, but also how I kind of act and live and my values that have come about from that. And also how I apply that into the life of working in a startup. And I think, going back to your question, how I've got to where I've got, I have grown up as an expat child. I've been very fortunate to spend the majority of my life in Dubai, been exposed to a lot of religion, cultures, languages, food, weathers, climates, etc. And yeah, in doing so, you just become so grateful for what you've got. That's one thing, and you become a better person because of the comprehensive value and exposure to so much that's out there. And then I finished that. I grew up there, went to school there, etc. Then came back, had a bit of an odd one at university. Spent 5 years at the University of Nottingham, great university. Did architecture and engineering. Spent a year in China, which was probably one of the best years of my life. Came back and did a master's in entrepreneurship, innovation, and management, which was really the spark for my interest in startups. But would I go and do an entrepreneurship degree per se again? No, because I think we can learn more on YouTube and in real life. But that's a
Wow.
different story.
Okay.
Then I worked on. That's not just to degrade the quality of the degree, because the professors and the exposure and learnings and lessons and theories that I got was phenomenal, and it really did help guide my entrepreneurial thinking. But in terms of practical application of business, I think there's a big difference between in the classroom and in real life.
So,
And I can
so
only say
if you
that
don't mind,
retrospectively, by
let
the
me
way.
jump in for just a minute
Sure,
and
sure.
stick us on that one for a minute, because I think this is something people need to grasp, and I don't want to derail your thoughts, but I think it's important to pause for a minute there. So, just for the audience's sake, I'm in agreement with you to an extent, and so my question to you would be: you're very educated, not just worldly, having traveled and done these things, but obviously just education in terms of university and things like that. And so here you are saying, well, you can learn a lot more on the internet, and I'm not necessarily disagreeing. Is that, Elliot, the difference between application and theory? Do you feel that's a big distinction in actually studying things and learning things at the university versus actually just going ahead and entering the business world, so that the university, you're learning just a lot of theory and what they teach you business is supposed to be about, versus actually being in the business world and actually experiencing it firsthand? Is that a big distinction for you, you think?
Well, I mean, we could speak for years at this, Jonathan. And, if we weren't capped for time, I'm sure we probably would. But to some degree, yes. In a nutshell, yes. However, it's not about just going out and doing it blindly. You've got to have some form of structure, plan, education, and whether that's through books, YouTube, or indeed in the classroom, so be it. However, I think the real learning, and the key thing here is, it doesn't matter if you're in a classroom, you're doing books, you're doing online courses, you've got mentorships or whatever, but the real learning comes through the experience, and
Right.
often, quite frankly, through the failures. So if you've got the right attitude to failure in the first place, and you recognize that realistically, when you go out and do something, you're probably not going to do it well the first time or the best of your ability. You might apply the best of your ability, but you're certainly not necessarily capable or trained in doing something. You'll probably fail, or you will probably not necessarily do as well as you'd like to do it. And that's okay. And once you've got those scars and you've got that framework to accept those scars and then move forward in a productive way, then you learn. Now, whether or not business school is the right environment for learning about business, or going out and doing an apprentice or an internship, or indeed joining a startup like I've done, is the way to go. It depends on the person, I think.
Very good point. Yeah, I think that's excellent advice. Sometimes it's right for people to go one path, and sometimes it's right for people to go another path. What is it about your own personality that you feel, or it sounds like you may have felt, that going the path of learning by joining a startup and having to do, per se, what is it about your personality that you think led you down that path?
It's a great question. I think it's thirst, it's hunger, it's ambition to maybe outlive my years. Not I'm 24, but I often get told, "Wow, you come across as if you're early 30s."
I would echo that.
I don't know if that's a compliment or
it is.
or not. And so I think it's not necessarily about learning in a startup. It comes back to the values, and it comes back to the exposure that my parents fortunately managed to give me when I was growing up. In the entrepreneurial scene, the beauty of a startup is that your role is not defined by the title. Your role is defined by whatever needs to be done for the business.
Yep.
And everyone is a whether you are front of house, back of house, techie, BD, whether you're a researcher, whether you're an administrator, everyone is a representative of the brand, and therefore a sales representative on some form or another. And so by having the right attitude to your role, to a team, in whatever role you have, and recognizing that you are representing the brand and therefore a sales representative in some capacity or another, you're gonna do hopefully better than someone who is more defined or tunnel visioned in what their role entails. So having the ambidexterity, having the versatility, and quite frankly having the willingness to trip up and improve is really, really important in the startup game. Because otherwise, if you're not willing to put your neck on the line, or you're not willing to hold your hand up when you've had a mistake, or you're not even willing to go beyond necessarily what you're expected, then and you have a team in that mentality, then the pace at which you deliver and the quality and value to which you deliver to your prospects or clients just won't be there.
Elliot, have you always had that these ideas, or did they evolve over time? I'm sort of looking at your background, thinking to myself, someone studies architecture and those type things, and then all of a sudden ends up deciding to go and do a master's in entrepreneurship and end up in the startup world. Was there a
Yeah.
point? Is there when I interview startup founders, there's often a point they almost always remember that exact moment they came up with the idea for their company. I'm curious, do you have this moment that you recall? It probably happened a little bit over time, but there's this moment you thought to yourself, this is the path I'm going to go down.
No,
Bit by bit,
not
then.
really. So I believe in planning in a pencil, but not necessarily planning in pen. So you've got to be flexible for sure. Did I plan my path? No, not really. When I went to university, I studied architecture and engineering, as you allude to. I quickly realized that it wasn't for me. But I'm not a quitter, and I also didn't know what my calling was. For example, if my calling when I was 18 had been geography, and I'd realized 2-3 months into studying architecture, then I would have transferred and gone and studied geography. Equally, had I known that it'd been marketing, I'd have done the same, but I didn't. That's the point. And so I grafted hard and I learned a lot. And also, architecture is a very, very demanding course on many aspects, not just the theory of how buildings are built, but the pressure to meet deadlines, the ability to work in teams, presenting on a weekly basis, standing up for your designs, thinking creatively, implementing the design and creative side with the engineering and maths and physics side, and blending that, and then obviously developing yourself when you're a young adult. So at that point, no, I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I knew I was interested in designing engineering, and I went into architecture. But I quickly realized, as I said, that architecture wasn't for me. So I did everything in my power to distract myself from architecture,
Sure.
such as going to China. And I'm continuing architecture, and I did well in the end because I grafted hard, and you've got to put the hours and the effort in. But I enjoyed China. When I was in China, I was exposed. I made a lot of friends in the realm of social sciences, in the realm of business, entrepreneurialism, marketing, and I was like, "Whoa, this is cool. This is all about people and trade and influence." And so I came back to Nottingham after that year to do my final year of architecture, actually. At this point, I knew full well that I didn't want to go into the fourth year of a degree that I wasn't necessarily enjoying. And I had a 0.001% chance, all of a sudden, it just came in front of my eyes, a door to leave architecture, qualify at the current stage, and move on. And then I called up the business school 3 days prior to the semester starting and said, "This is me. Have you got any vacancies?" And they said, "Yeah, we've got this." And I applied that night, and then the next day I got an offer, and then on the Monday
Wow.
I started. So it was
Amazing.
all a bit nuts. It was so in essence, no, there wasn't a path, but you create your own luck to some degree, and you've got to jump on opportunities when they come.
Sure. To round that off a little bit, a couple of quick thoughts. So one of the things I talk about with I told you when we first met that occasionally I mentor some of the young men coming out of college and things like that, or have in the past. And I always push them, don't focus on experience, focus on skill sets, right? So it doesn't mean that you have to be, and you didn't have to be an architect. If we were to rewind that bit just then and you listen to the skills that you laid out that it takes to be a good architect, what you
Mm.
just told me was that you gained some of the skills to be good in the startup industry as well, is what it really just told me. So I think a lot of folks get stuck on, I go to school and I have this degree and it means I should go into this field. And I think what they need to think about is, what skill sets do I gain by going through this degree in this channel, and where could I put those skills to use? Doesn't mean that it has to be in marketing. By the way, I was a marketing major, and I've never worked as an actual marketer in an agency in my entire life.
Interesting.
My first work in marketing was actually running the marketing department for a $230 million organization, and the reason was because no one else at the senior level really wanted to or grasped how to do marketing for that organization. So folks, we've had a ton of great takeaways already. One of those is, don't focus on your degree, focus on your skill sets and where you can put those to work. So that's really great information. I'm starting to see sort of this path to go into the startup world, and so you get interested in the startup industry and business and all these things, and you come back and you do that in China. You come back to the UK, study and get your master's. What happens next? Do you go straight from there into the startup world like you are now, or is there a little bit in between?
there's a little bit in between, but before I touch upon that, Jonathan, I think I would like to elaborate a little bit deeper on
Please do.
what you talk about on the skills and the traits and the experience kind of side of things. And if you there's a really important T word, the big T, which is transferable skills or transferability. And so, you can, some of the best entrepreneurs or most successful business leaders in this day and age didn't even go to high school, let alone college or university. Some of the best entrepreneurs and leaders in this day and age studied engineering and now are business leaders. Some of them were former athletes and now are business leaders. And the point is, you're absolutely right. I mean, I'm speaking to one right through my camera right now. You've got to have the ability to transfer your skills. And if you have that tunnel vision of, well, this is how I can apply my skill set, then you will, maybe the startup world isn't for you per se, I should say. If you've got I've got tunnel vision on focusing how I can build my skill set. Now I've got like transferable vision on peripheral vision on how I can apply that skill set, then you're really becoming a winner. And again, application of skill set quite often is not through the classroom. It's actually through, here's $10, go and convert that $10 in the next 5 hours into as much as you can. Oh wow, you're engaging creative elements of the brain. You're putting a little bit of pressure. You're giving limited resource. That's when innovation kind of really happens. So that's what I wanted to add there.
Perfect.
So after that, what did I do? My goodness, I became a student politician in a student union in the University of Nottingham. And that was awesome because I learned a lot about professional maturity. I learned a lot about how education works behind the scenes, how decisions are made. There's a lot of bureaucracy and politics involved, but they don't teach you this in business school. And so a lot of failings, and I upset a lot of people because, as you can tell, my ambitious and outgoing personality didn't quite fit the status quo. But that said, I learned to calm down. I learned to conduct myself in a certain way in a certain environment without letting that hinder who I truly was and the value I could offer or the different perspective I could offer. And that was awesome. That was, I made some great friends there, got exposed to a lot of opportunities, as I said, and fantastic opportunity to build my network, which as we both agree upon is tremendously important. And yet again, they don't teach you in B school. Needless to say, I then got poached. I got headhunted essentially by my current co-founder, Aftab Malhotra, the co-founder of Growth Enabler. We came across one another through a mutual acquaintance. Again, the importance of that network that I would never have seen coming. And he wasn't looking at my CV, he wasn't looking at my background, and we interviewed for numerous opportunities, and we just had conversations like this, quite frankly. And he saw something in me, and I was very lucky. The timing was right, and he said, Elliott, I would like you to join Growth Enabler. And I was like, well, what's Growth Enabler?
What is this?
Didn't see that. That's a curveball. We were talking about all sorts of things like life priorities and values and all these things. And what I didn't quite realize, and now obviously I realize looking back, you can only connect the dots going back, is that he was testing me and eyeing me up and quizzing me and questioning me on what makes me, my personality, my character, what drives me. Because he wanted people, and that's how we hire now at Growth Enabler anyway. He wanted people with certain traits, not necessarily skills, because you can train skills. So we do something called blind hiring, which is where we train on skills, hire on traits.
Absolutely. No, absolutely. Couldn't agree more. Some of my best hires have been the fact that they had enough experience, but they didn't have all of it. And I just, I said, I don't care. They've got the drive. They've got the hustle. I can teach them everything else, but I can't teach them those other things. So that's wonderful that you guys look for that in candidates.
It's important, and you create a team that is that's more comprehensive. I mean, if a designer and a marketer and an accountant and a creative get together, and they don't have the thirst or drive and desire, and one of them looks at their watch at 3 o'clock, hoping to leave by 3:30. One of them looks at their watch at 4:59, hoping to leave by 5. One of them feels that he or she is pulling pulling all the hard work because he or she is working till 9 p.m. and one of them feels that he or she is deserving to be the leader, it's not gonna go anywhere. If you've got a team who are united on a common vision, mission, purpose, and yet you still got the designer, the accountant, the creative, etc., then you're using this skill set in a way that is united, and that's where the best teams come. And the importance of culture is phenomenal. We say that culture eats strategy for breakfast, and that's why we hire on traits.
Absolutely. Very similar to a way I phrase it, culture trumps strategy all day long. So you're dead on. Culture is so much more important than strategy. So if I could turn us a little bit now, so you and I were talking, and I think this ties in pretty well to the things you were talking about there, culture and traits and all these things. So when you and I connected the end of last week, we did a fair amount of talking about the startup industry and the benefits of it and remote work and those type of things. Maybe you could talk a little bit about those things, and were those things also part of what attracted you to the startup culture and industry?
So I think the startup industry has a stereotype associated to it when it says culture. People maybe think tight jeans, shirt, laptop, MacBook, coffee shop.
Right.
What are you actually doing?
A bouncy ball as your chair, right? Bouncy ball as your chair.
Exactly.
Sure.
Bouncy ball chairs, like free beers at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And okay, maybe in the movies, but that's not how it is. Quite frankly, you've got to have all those things that we talked about with regard to mindset as traits in terms of building a team, but you've also got to graft. And not every startup has a culture like that. Some startups are much more structured than others. Some have no structure at all. And so and neither is right, neither is wrong. But if you were looking at the balance between art and science, it really depends upon who's in the team, what technology and or industry the startup is in, how much funding is behind the team, how long the team been running. Has it pivoted? Is it in debt? There's so many contributing factors to attracting someone to a particular business, whether it's a startup, a scale up, a large business, a corporate. And so it's difficult to put a finger on it as to what attracted me to the startup industry. What attracted me to Growth Enabler is very different. It's the people, it's the mission, it's the values, it's the culture. And we could be baking cakes as a startup, quite frankly, but it would be great fun. It's still around around the same people. So yeah, and it's not radical. It's nothing completely revolutionary. It's not new. You see it all the time when people move from job to job. They pull particular partners or co-workers with them, and that happens across startups all the way through to corporates. But when you get the right people together on a mission, that is something else. And that is what I didn't necessarily feel, or I don't necessarily feel the corporate world has. And that's where the magic and the spark really happens in a startup.
Fantastic. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. You did talk to me a little bit about the sort of flexibility. So when we talked earlier, you said, "Hey, I'm sitting here on a nice patch of green grass in London, beautiful sky, that type thing." Yeah. Maybe you didn't recognize it when you were going into the industry, but is that also a part of what's appealing to you? Just this overall sort of control and flexibility of what you're doing, and not necessarily the traditional 8 to 5, 9 to 5 job. Is there part of that keeps you going with what you're doing with Growth Enabler?
Without a doubt, Jonathan. And I said to you, I know it may sound a little bit cliche for the people listening, but I said to you, I try and trade in the currency of love, enjoyment, and happiness, as opposed to dollars, British pounds, or yen.
You did.
And what do I mean by that? I mean, you agree with that. It's not about the financial gain. Because financial gains are numbers on a screen. And beyond a certain point, which heck doesn't really need to be much money at all, actually, is just sitting there. And so actually it's how you use your time and how you trade your time, not for money, but for enjoyment, for experiences, for people, for conversations, for intellectual building knowledge. that is really exciting. And I think Growth Enabler and many other startups like it do offer the ability for remote working or whatever. But again, the idea, maybe the stigma attached to remote working is flip flops, board shorts, bikinis, beers on a beach in Bali, and it may well be it, but you've got to graft hard, and you've still got to work hard. But I think that the really ironic, I thought about this over the weekend, Jonathan. The really ironic thing is that we were having such a meaningful conversation, it was just a lovely, lovely conversation. It was delightful, quite frankly.
Absolutely.
On Friday evening, London time, and it was about 6-7 o'clock, and everyone around me, I was in the Square Mile, which is in the city of London, was rushing around in their blue and black suits, rushing to their next gig or to go home to their partners or whatever. And there I was on this small patch of grass speaking to a lovely, wise gentleman across the pond. And I just thought, like, everyone's got it all wrong.
I couldn't agree more. They do. It's back to my comment to you about designing your life and making your work life fit. I think not enough people. I mean, it's even been studied. I can't quote the statistics, but I know in the U.S. they've studied it. People spend more time planning their vacations than they do their professional life. I mean, it's unbelievable. And I can only say that because I've been there and done that. I was one of those people who spent my entire year thinking that this was the way it was going to be for me. And it wasn't until a few years ago that I kind of had a moment and realized, that's just, I don't think that's me. At least at the time. You never say never, but I don't, at the time I realized it wasn't me. And since then I've just kind of tried to be real deliberate with how I go about things. Well, great stuff.
I want to give you a massive high five all the way across the screen.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Because actions speak louder than words, and
sure.
we can talk about it, and there's lots of people who study the idea of remote working and building a life designed by you and your control, and that's great. But the ironic thing is that most of them studying it or thinking about it don't do it, or may well be behind a desk reporting to someone for some deadline, which is important, but quite ironic.
Yeah, it's. I think people just need to be more deliberate. That's what it really comes down to. I don't care if you are in the corporate world. Be real deliberate with who you go to work for. Does it allow you the lifestyle that you really want? Instead of, I think your comments are actually probably the best ones we've had. This whole conversation is back to the idea of just chasing the almighty dollar. Stop doing it, people. Just stop. At what point's enough? And you're going to look back, and I know it's cliche, but you're going to look back and wish you hadn't spent all the time chasing after it. And what's interesting, Elliott, is I think you would agree, is if they would just focus on doing the right things, the almighty dollar will come. That's the other interesting part, right? I mean, it'll come if you just do the right things. Why don't you?
I can't comment myself just yet because I'm still so early into the career gig. But
big things for you ahead, I'm sure.
100%. I mean, you look at not necessarily 100% that comment. That sounds completely vain. My goodness, might have to edit that one. 100% agree that follow your heart, follow something that you enjoy, that you're interested in at the very least, whether that's baking, playing instruments, driving, gardening, negotiating, trade. If you love trading, go. If you love investment banking, go do it. But don't do it because you think it's the right thing or because you feel pressure from other people, like other external stakeholders. Why? Because they are not you and they're not living your life. You're living your life. And so you can make money out of everything. I mean, that's how an economy works. If you've got the right attitude towards doing it, then the money will come. But if you try not to trade in money and you trade in enjoyment and happiness, love, purpose, and time, and recognizing the importance of every second, as cliche as it sounds, you'll live a better lifestyle and a better life. Heck, I'm sitting on a sofa here in London. I think you, from the looks of it, you're at a home office. So,
I'm at a home office in pseudo pajamas right now. So.
I mean, there you go.
So tell us a little bit about Growth Enabler.
Yeah, sure. So essentially, we're doing something quite cool and quite disruptive. We are indexing and scoring the tech startup economy globally. And what that means is that we've now got 525,000 startups across 15 different technology areas and 20 industry verticals that we are tracking and scoring in real time. Now, a crass or crude example would be to consider an amalgamation of Bloomberg, LinkedIn, and the research capacities of a company like Gartner, for which actually, interestingly, our two co-founders were from. And our head of research, our VP of intelligence, who we've just hired, was actually a very reputable leader at Gartner. And what this allows, the benefits to startups, because we're so mission driven, and we recognize that being a startup ourselves, it's difficult. It's a hard graft, and quite frankly, the numbers don't stack in our favor. So everything we do for startups is 100% free, and the benefits are exposure to VCs and corporates for opportunities, understanding the competitive landscape, not just in your local geography or within your local networks, but across the world. And of course, when you have a third party objectively scoring you, you can identify your strengths and weakness, no least according to the market, not necessarily towards yourself. And so what's the business model? It's a SaaS model for which VCs and corporate leaders pay us an annual subscription, which again is ludicrously disruptive. And the reason being is because we're using automation, and so we can pass on our savings to our clientele to accelerate decision makings around startups, to give them more confidence and frameworks around decisions in startups, and essentially to find startups that are most relevant to them at that moment in time, whether it's a pain point, a business problem, or a merger and acquisition opportunity, or even a co-development opportunity. And so we do that by pulling data from over 5 million sources and weighting it through regression analysis onto essentially a score that we call the Growth Enabler score, applied to that startup that, again, changes in real time according to the performance. But in order to do so, there needs to be a framework. So there's 30 parameters that we look for and track. And of those five key parameters are team and leadership. So who's running the business? Who are the advisors? And what is the history? Business traction. Who are the clientele? Who's actually paying the wages, so to speak, of the business. Social media and branding. How engaged, not just how many likes, but how engaged are your community, our startups community online. Product and innovation. So what stage is the product at in its cycle? Alpha, beta, MVP. Maybe they've got multiple products. Have they applied for any patents or IPs? And finally, importantly for VCs in particular, financial strength. So who's funded them? What stage of funding are they at? And how are the numbers cracking up? So that's the framework for which we're scoring and indexing startups.
And is the algorithms already built that does the scoring? Is that evolving over time as well, though? How you weight different factors as you learn more about how your system works?
100%. So the algorithm is an element of the machine, and people have heard of machine learning. In essence, it's over time as the machine learns and fails, just like humans should do, and gets guided and taught and has larger data sets for which to learn from, then the scores are becoming much more reliable every single day. And the only hindrance at that getting better and better and better and better is capacity, server capacity. And that's not really a hindrance in this day and age because server prices are becoming much cheaper as well.
Absolutely. And probably the more data you're able to put through the system, the better you can sort of mold the scoring algorithm itself.
Exactly.
Yeah. So what's next for you, Almi? What are you working on now that you can share? Version 2 or enhancements or plans in general?
Well, you've heard of a CRM, which is a customer relationship management tool. We are building what we're led to believe as the first SRM, startup relationship management tool. Let's just digest that for a second. What that means is that you can track and progress with your team members who may be virtual, who may be in the same office, who may be in different time zones, the engagements that you've had with particular startups, whether that's for piloting, whether that's for investment opportunities, whether you're doing some due diligence on them. And on top of all the intelligence that we provide, the in-depth analysis that supports this new SRM with regard to how rich the data is and the way that you can cut the data according to that startup is something that we're very, very excited about. And that will be coming out very soon. So I really look forward to sharing that with the world.
Very cool. And if people wanted to learn more, where should they go? Website, Twitter?
The best thing would be check out our website, which is www.growthenabler.com. Anyone, of course, listening, welcome to drop me an email, Elliott, that's ELLIOTT at growthenabler.com, or, of course, Twitter, where I'm sure Jonathan will share my Twitter handle.
I sure will. Great place to wrap it up. Elliott, thanks so much for taking time to be on the show. I think we need to have you back and have some more in-depth conversations. We've covered a lot of ground and really good stuff for people. So thank you so much for taking time out of your day.
I'm delighted. Thank you so much for having me. And whenever the invitation is there, I look forward to coming back again. And if you're ever in London, you certainly know the first person to get in touch with.
Yeah, I do. I need to make a trip very, very soon. Thanks so much for joining me.
Jonathan, it's been a pleasure. Cheers. Thank you.